Everyone. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend and I hope spring is in full swing. Today, super excited. I'm a very big fan of WorkRise and very excited for today's presentation. But before we get into that, I will pass it to Matt Bogosian for some updates. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, everyone. April 14th, 2025. This is AMCC's National 30-minute call, same time every Monday, 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central, 9:30 Mountain, and 8:30 Pacific. I'm Matt Bogosian, Executive Director of AMCC, the nation's manufacturing community of practice. And on the controls there is David Van Sicklen, our Operations Director. Welcome all. As we know, there's two weekly activities, this 30-minute Monday call where we build and maintain trusted relationships, which are a necessary component for all the other things we need to do. Trust is the coin of the realm, right? But the other things are building a common narrative, building evidence-based strategies, building activation that delivers meaningful outcomes, and ultimately we want to get to better structures in this nation, and that's what we're all working on together. We've learned over a decade of doing this work is to build that trust. We need to make these weekly calls. This one's been going on for about a decade. Meaningful, open to those who are intent on playing a meaningful role and meaningful work. Smart folks in research institutes sometimes call this a social science that we're operationalizing complex adaptive system science. But whatever the name, it starts with trusted relationships. So thanks for being here, adding your value, adding your name and affiliation in the chat, like David suggested. So that's one weekly activity. The second one is, of course, the AMCC update newsletter that goes out just about every Friday, informed by all of the good stuff that you send us, by your input on these Monday calls. And we put a lot in there each week. And you saw from this last Friday's update, we have a presentation today from the Urban Institute, organization we're psyched about having a closer relationship with. So, but before that, I want to level set on there's all this in the news about manufacturing, and level set about like why we prioritize manufacturing is you hear it in many of the framework activities that we do. One, we need smarter products that solve problems and improve the human condition. You hear that lingo all the time around key, national priorities: defense, energy, transportation, ag, IT, and health. And so that's number one. Number two, we prioritize manufacturing because of the proximity between design and production. That matters in the process of continuously improving the products we make. It's not a static process. So having, you just can't outsource all of manufacturing and stay on the cutting edge. So there's that proximity reason. And number three, manufacturing in communities can have a positive multiplier effect through the rest of the economy. So our R&D results in this kind of continuous improving innovation economy, stronger, more resilient companies, communities, et cetera. And the bonus is, for the percentage of people who do get manufacturing jobs, these are really good jobs and careers with purpose. We're not going to have a large percentage of the American workforce in manufacturing, but it's an important part and a big bonus that those that get those jobs, have good careers. So with that off my chest, before we get to the discussion with the Urban Institute, let's take a few minutes for those who are new to AMCC's weekly national call to introduce themselves. Raise your hand, say hi. Those who want to reintroduce yourself, raise your hand. Just say where you are in the ecosystem of support for manufacturing. If you have any quick comments, like to know that. Let's see. I can call on a few people just to model how that can work. Let's see. How about in Pittsburgh, Petra Mitchell? Where are you in the ecosystem of support? Yeah.
Hold on. Hi, Matt. Sorry, you're calling me out. I'm Petra Mitchell. I'm with Catalyst Connection, and we're the MEP. So we're the technical assistance and workforce development services provider to small manufacturers in our community.
That's great. Thank you so much for being on the call.
No.
Carolyn Bush, where are you in the ecosystem of support?
Here I am. I work at the Department of Commerce in Washington State, and I've been attending this for some time. I used to staff the Manufacturing Council, which was a legislatively created council looking at doubling the manufacturing workforce in Washington State. And I have left that position and just now work on policy and legislative issues. But of course, and unfortunately, our legislature is not focusing on manufacturing right now, which is, but we are in a budget crisis unrelated to the overall economy, but as a result of prior budgeting practices by the state, kind of leaving behind. We had been really a very clean state, and we left behind some of our practices, and now we're paying the price. So they're not talking about really new programs or major investments, even in existing programs right now.
Yeah, thanks so much for those comments. You know, that's one of the things that we've had build a relationship with the National Governors Association, all of these other ecosystem providers about like how can state governments lean in more to manufacturing? And we're going to do a big thing in the AMCC update this week, Carolyn, around California just finally rolled out. They're calling it the economic blueprint, but they've adopted this bottom-up strategy. They broke the state up into 13 subregions. We'll go on and on. And so look for that in the AMCC update, and we'll talk about that more. But like every part of the ecosystem matters, right? You know, that's why we are working with public, private, nonprofit organizations of all flavors to kind of create this framework, which we oftentimes, pull up, that talks about, what we need to make with the new technologies, the big six around the ecosystem of support in manufacturing communities, and then our North Star. So it's complex, it's hard work. It's obvious that you get it, Petra. Gosh, the whole MEP system, right, is under threat. An important, really multi-decade long investment in the ecosystem of support. A lot going on, and us getting together at up front at the beginning of each week it's what we've learned over the years is a super important touch point so that we can go back to our silos and our regional networks, et cetera. So thanks for being on. Thanks for chiming in. Don't be shy. It's okay to lurk, but we'd rather have you leaning forward. Add stuff into the chat. That's a cool place to move very quickly. To share best practices or challenges. There's a lot of helpers, man. This is most of the people that jump in here are, they want to help other people, right? Regardless of where they're operating. And we're getting away from this race to the bottom thing for, well, my state's the best, no matter what, kind of a thing. We can all do better by working together. So we have roundtable calls for the whole 30 minutes sometimes, but other times, like today, we have a presentation, and delighted today to have a new BFF with us. She's been on our calls, and I want to shout out Urban Institute's Todd Green for his intention in building a partnership with AMCC. Our friends at IEDC, Nathan Oley, they invited us to their summit, and that's where I got to meet Todd, and now Megan Tackney, who's the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Engagement. Like Michelle was saying, Megan's going to tell us about this WorkRise program. So anyway, overall, Megan, delighted to have you in the orb, and tell us about yourself, WorkRise, and how we strengthen the manufacturing part of the Big Six around the country. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you everyone for being here this morning. A few of the things Matt said at the front really resonate with a quick presentation I'm going to give, and then some questions I'd love to ask all of you, which is centered around evidence-based solutions and how do we build and continue the history of high quality, good jobs, mission-driven within the manufacturing sector. So let me, I'm going to share my screen. So tell me if you can see it. Hold on. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, great.
Yep.
Like I said, I'm Megan Techney from WorkRise. And sorry, hold on one second, guys, because now while I screen share, the slides are not changing. So sorry. Give me one more second. Let me escape it and do it this way. Hopefully you can still see that. So WorkRise is a research to action network that thinks about how do we elevate workers in the labor market. So concretely, what that means is that we have research all over the country. We have about 80 grantees. So we produce new research. We also translate existing research. We think about sort of the bodies of evidence that are presented and are there new research agendas that we can be putting together. Then we say, well, can anyone use this research? And we bring it to folks like you. So practitioners, policymakers, advocates, employers, often having to translate it because a lot of the research that's sort of in the field right now is not totally usable. And then we often like to sit at the table to say, how do we advance your agenda? Just to give you a quick flavor of what our research is like and our topics, we do all sorts of research, randomized control trials, community-led pilots. You can see the list here. A lot of our research thinks about how do we improve job quality within the labor market. So we have pilots on schedule control, best non-degree hiring practices, what are the opportunities coming about in the energy transition, sectoral bargaining models, organizing strategies, et cetera. And then all of our projects have a research partner and a field partner. And so it could be anything from government labor enforcement offices, big businesses, advocates themselves, unions, colleges, et cetera. Now, why am I talking to you today? Well, that's because we strongly believe, as I know everyone here does, that manufacturing presents an incredible opportunity to change the lives of workers themselves. So I know there's often a lot of discussion about the products we produce and remaining competitive, but WorkRise wants to zero in is how do we support the workers in the manufacturing sector as key to the solution. So I want to tell you quickly about, again, a few pieces of research that we have that might be helpful to you or not. And that first one is we have a series of case studies around the country with manufacturing companies that partnered with a variety of intermediaries or manufacturing support systems, including various MEP networks, unions, different workforce development boards, to ensure that business decisions were made in complete partnership with their workers. So what does that mean? These were pilots that thought about if there were going to be tech reforms, there was new software rolled out, they shouldn't roll it out with the actual workers testing it out first. If they were going to find new recycling techniques, the workers knew who the right vendors were, not the CEOs, the workers. In cases where there needed to be business transitions. In this case, the workers themselves came to the table and said, here's how we make a good financial deal for the both of us. And that's where we really saw success. We have a pilot with Magnet, that's the MEP in Northeast Ohio that thinks about a new program they're running that provides wraparound services to their workers. It really made a huge difference in their ability to hire and recruit and keep workers. They also did a study about some dynamics going on the manufacturing, the plant floor, that meant that people were leaving because there was behaviors going on between workers that weren't good. And they were really honest about what some of those dynamics were. A topic that I know you all know, actually it was done a month and a half ago before the new tariffs were announced, is a data visualization where we tried to map some of what the tariffs could mean for car manufacturing plant shutdowns and how many jobs could be lost across a few different major employers. We're finishing up a paper that has it's basically a massive data paper that shows all sorts of trends across the US manufacturing sector. So really zeroing on job quality. So what is schedule control like? What's paid leave like? What's health insurance access like? And we're going to have an accompanying brief that thinks about that for young workers specifically. I think that there's a lot of conversation of what it means to familiarize manufacturing to young workers, but we also want to raise what do young workers want out of these jobs. And outside of knowing about them, they have to feel like they're good jobs. And we have another paper that talks about what does that mean? What is a good job for a young worker? And that's things like their ability to control their schedule, their ability to feel invested in their job. Are they excited? Do they feel like they have some sense of power? So we have a piece that will go with, the data of what sort of the trends in manufacturing, and then how do we translate that to getting more young people into these jobs and staying in these jobs. And the final two pieces, before I'd love to ask some questions to you guys, we have pieces that are not explicitly about manufacturing, but I think really intersect. And one of those is the Workforce Almanac, also an interactive data visual portal that shows all the workforce development providers across the US, where they're located, what industries they work with, their contact information. That was filling a gap where there's a lot of people who work on workforce development, but we often don't know who each other are and where they're located. This is in partnership with Harvard. And another project for a theme that I know has been brought up on this call, and I think will continue to be talked about, which is employee ownership. So we have a project with Project Equity that thinks about what employee ownership means for specifically Black wealth creation in the US. But we also built an interactive data portal that shows you all the state laws around employee ownership. So if you are interested in your particular state to understand, is employee ownership something I can take on, you can go into this portal, you can see if there have been laws or regulations already passed to just kind of give you a baseline of the policy environment you're going to be working in. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. So that is a lot at once, and I'm a New Yorker, so I know I talk very fast. But what we're really trying to get to, like Matt said in the beginning, is what is the evidence that you, the individuals actually making the change on the ground, need to build these in, actually, I don't want to say build, because I think for a long time, manufacturing is and was incredibly good jobs. And we want to continue that trend. We want to use manufacturing as an example to say, if we do this here, we can do this in other places, and really returning to this concept of family sustaining wages. So I'd love to pause here if you have any questions about the research I've presented, but I'd also love to hear from you on workforce specifically. What's evidence that you need as it relates to hiring, keeping workers? You wish you had more evidence that showed, and then I promise I'll stop speaking, the importance of leave. This came up a lot when we had the recent conversation of whether or not there was paid leave for sick leave, right? Which we know is so important to workers. And how do we normalize that across a number of sectors? So stopping, would love questions on any research we already have, happy to share it, but also would love to hear from you about what more you need.
Yeah, that is great, Megan. So just raise your hand. I mean, it's there's the lingo is a big thing, right? Like, so I'm thinking, Megan, about the types of research that you've seen that people are more likely to activate around. I know you're asking us that, but I
Yes.
want to throw it back in lingo that would make
Yes.
sense to me in my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is our most resonant research are pilots. So because they're projects that show you what you tried, what worked, and what didn't work. They are, of course, our most labor-intensive projects because, it's the real world, and evidence is not as clean as anybody wants it to be. It's not like this absolutely worked and this absolutely did not, and I have the data to prove it to you. It's context. So even in our project, right, with Magnet in Ohio, some parts of it worked and some didn't. There's still some remaining issues that have to be worked out, but at least gives you a baseline. So yeah, pilots, to your question, Matt, I think are always the most usable evidence. I am not a researcher. Some of my research friends love data that they can manipulate. For me, sometimes that's the least usable, actually, because how do you and your state know why that has anything to do
Yeah.
with you? Um,
Yeah.
so I'll stop
Yeah.
there.
Like, what's the playbook? You need the data with a playbook to
That's right.
move out.
That's right.
Right. Carolyn. Yeah. You have your hand up.
I'm very glad to see that you are focusing on the quality jobs initiative as part of how you look at this. Um, I Washington is a very blue state, and frankly, Democrats at least in Washington State, have never been particularly interested in economic development. It's just not where they go. And so it's hard to get their attention. The manufacturing initiative I mentioned earlier was initiated by Republicans and moved forward by Democrats unanimously, but it was really a Republican initiative. And those partisan politics, definitely come into play. So when I used to work in that area, and because I care about it deeply, the income inequality that we face in this state in particular without an income tax, and so on, like, how do we get Democrats interested in economic development and manufacturing, right? And for me, that was living wage jobs. And keeping it as simple as possible. I like all the things you brought up, which were, including benefits and all that, but just trying to get people to the notion of how about you pay people fairly would be pretty nice. Like, we don't have a middle class in Washington State anymore. It's gone. We have a lot of poor people and then very, very wealthy people that hold most of the salaries, not even including wealth. So I'm really interested in the fact that you chose that, and interested in why and what kind of reaction you're getting from other states or entities that you see fit in mentioning. Thank you.
Yeah. And quickly, so first, it really resonates with me, Carolyn. So transparently, before this, I come from the mayor's office in New York City. And New York is very similar, right? We have the largest income disparity in America, incredibly high earners, incredibly, and manufacturing is what saved us during the pandemic. Just as a side note, it was the only thing I was in the mayor's office during the pandemic. If we couldn't produce our own goods in New York City, we were screwed. And all of our goods went into the rest of America, right? Because we have the port. So it was an incredible, so it really resonates with me what you're saying. So I think it's really interesting to me that, and we're a nonpartisan organization, so let me say this at the front end, but that you brought up the connection, getting Democrats interested in this, because we really think about manufacturing as one of these issues where we can get Republicans and Democrats to the table and translate the job quality elements transparently a little bit across onto the Republican aisle. So to say, like, we all want this to be successful, but it's not going to be successful if we don't address the job quality pieces. And in certain states, you see these trends of which side is getting to wage issues or health benefits or et cetera. So that's really, I would love to talk to you more about how that dynamic has played out. I also think I like that you brought up the living wage, because when we have employer interactions, it's really hard to avoid that. At the end of the day, people need money. No one wants to talk about that, but like, wages are incredibly key. And so if you don't address that head on with your workforce, all these other things feel like fluff if you've not fully addressed whether or not they can afford these jobs. At that said, a person's ability to have all these other parts of the job, like job flexibility, really also affects their wages, right? Because if you can't take time off to care for your kids, then you have to pay for childcare, and then all these other dynamics that come up. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but we are trying to think of this from variety of intersecting issues. But these calls for me are so helpful to sort of refine what are other sort of outstanding issues and dynamics playing out in the States. I will note our case studies that were more about manufacturing and businesses and workers working together were across the States. So we know this sort of innovation is possible anywhere. But it's also pretty employer by employer. We're not seeing like big trends in one particular place. At least I've not, but I'd love to hear from people if they are. We're kind of seeing like splashes of it.
Hey, Megan, if you wouldn't mind putting your contact info in the chat. And there was a good question there by Joe Meyer about how can, your research or Urban Institute's research or any research really that's useful be used by owners of SMEs, like small, medium-sized, family-owned manufacturing, like who in those entities are the right positions to go after to educate. Any experience with that? I know many people
Yes.
here have some experience there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so our case studies were only small and medium-sized manufacturers. So I'd love to share that with the group. Those are only, we had no large manufacturer agree to be part of that study. And the magnet project I'm talking about, again, magnets, the MEP, so they have relationships with a lot, but the intervention around the supportive services and some of the dynamics between the workers, that was also only small and medium-sized manufacturers in Northeast Ohio. So a lot of our research actually speaks to the smaller manufacturers. We also partnered with NAM during a recent event last year to sort of think about job design and employee partnership. And, they were extremely helpful to give us a look in the field, but actually not this to get me in trouble, but like I have seen actually less examples in the very large ones. I've seen a lot of innovation in the small and medium-sized manufacturers. So I don't know if that, again, that helps answer your question, but I'd love to share the studies I have on small and medium-sized manufacturers. And we've actually seen some of the most interesting innovation in those spaces.
So David put in the chat that we're going to share more on WorkRise research case studies in our upcoming Friday AMCC update. So that'll be a tool for access. Yeah, this is such, we have a lot of research entities participating in the AMCC network around this common theme, in different parts of the ecosystem of support, workforce, where you're talking about, Megan, but other areas, with these research, our national labs and these manufacturing institutes of innovation, we have all of this great evidence, but it's not woven together in a package for stakeholders to put it into action. And so we're so excited about your work and your partnership in AMCC to bring it to the fore. You talked about NAM. We have a partnership, as folks know, if you're reading the AMCC update and the Monday call, around trying to co-create some manufacturing verticals around priority industries. A couple of pilots are in the works right now, one around the maritime industrial base, another around aerospace. Those are new structures. Remember at the outset, I was talking about we got to get to better structures in this country. And so we're hoping that could be one structure where workforce research and tactics that are smart can be put into play more specifically for a particular vertical, because not every region has, an expertise or a big, zone of activity around every particular manufacturing vertical. And so we're going to try this as a new structure, right, for how we move farther, faster together. So delighted to have you a part of it. We're here at the top of the hour, and we keep these short, even though we could go on and on. But we all have to get back to our silos, and appreciate all of you guys working together on this call, on the AMCC update. In between, send us notes, send us, the great stuff in the chat. Your notes to us, your calls to us. We curate them and put many of those things in the AMCC update every week so that it spurs the next Monday's conversation or other activities. We do roadshows, webinars, the national summit that we've done, and this new structuring thing around manufacturing verticals I described with NAM. Lots of activities out there. Thanks for being on, spending your time. And Megan, a hearty thank you for being on and adding your value to American manufacturing. So Michelle, why don't you close it out? Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. Again, huge fan and love this discussion on job quality and wages. Excited for Friday's update. Everyone, we hope you have a great week. And if you celebrate, I hope you have a great Easter or Passover. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.